welcome. Who is here for the first time? Lots of you. You missed something. Anyway, look. Sorry. There's a list of people. Please come. £6. Best value for money, best kept secret in London. We've got tomorrow Anthony Gormley, and then the Weymouths on Wednesday. And then next week we've got very funny Jimmy Carr, Hannah Rothschild, Nick Sirota, Andrew Marr, Nicholas Parsons, who is 92. Amazing. And then Julian Fellows and Kirsty Young, and I think we might get in Maritastina on June the 29th. So look out for this. Anyway, what happens is this. I have a conversation with our guest. The idea is to invite people who have led extraordinary lives. And I have a go with them for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then I'm going to let you, the audience, interact with them, because you don't get much chance sometimes to interact with famous people. Looking at you lot. So here's your chance. The only proviso is that you've got to ask a question which is intelligent. If it is not, you'll be passed over. Apparently I've had several complaints, but I don't give a damn. You've got to be intellectually or intelligent. Now, let's get one thing out of the way. You've got Richard E. Grant. I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know. Presumably the E comes from your father's name as the Hausen, or however you spell it, how do you pronounce it?
However you want to pronounce it, but how it came about is that I had been in England, having emigrated from Swaziland.
Louder.
I'd emigrated in 1982 from Mbabane in Swaziland and come to London, and I had been working for a couple of years.
How do you pronounce that name again? The capital.
Mbabane.
Mbabane is 2.5 syllables.
Mbabane.
Mbabane. 3.5 syllables.
God. Okay.
Mbabane.
So, and I'd had photographs printed with my name on the bottom, and I was doing a play with Leonard Rossiter, the late Leonard Rossiter, in Bromley, which was supposedly headed for the West End. And a man called Peter Grant, who was called Richard Grant, who was retired, phoned up Equity and said, there's somebody using my name, how dare they, blah, blah, blah. So I got phoned up by a real British boiler on the phone who said, you're using the name, you've got to change your name. And I said, I've got no money, I've had my photographs printed, can I speak to Peter Grant himself? And she said, yes, all right. So he agreed to let me put a name in between. And then I said, would you mind a letter in between? And he agreed to that. And then I phoned Equity back, and I said, he's agreed to let me put a letter in between. So she said, well, what? And I said, Richard A. Grant, Richard B. Grant, Richard D. She said, I haven't got all day. And it was on E that it stuck. So that's how it happened. And then I was on Paula Yates's bed, as she used to have this bed on Channel 4 breakfast television. And there was a live phone-in section, a bit like this. And the widow of Peter, alias Richard Grant, phoned up and said, you can now drop the E because my husband died 6 months ago. And everybody was on cocaine at that time of the morning, and I kind of went, oh, thank you so much. Not me. So the E is stuck.
But I noticed that you are a very sentimental person. I mean, you feel very close to Swaziland, don't you?
Well, do you feel close to where you come from?
Not Swaziland, no. I mean, I come from a big country called China. Swaziland is a landlocked country with 1 million people in the middle of nowhere and stuffed by Mozambique and South Africa. But you seem to be very fond of it. You're very proud of your father being there. You're very proud of your ancestry there. You call yourself a Swazi English. I mean, are you really as romantic as Karen Blixen of Kenya, or wherever she came from? I mean, do you have a real affection for this Swaziland, which, do you even go back to it?
I go back once a year. Karen Blixen was from Denmark.
Oh, sorry.
But
the African...
Do you go back to that big China that you just talked about?
But when she said, I love whatever it is, she was in Africa.
Yes, but she didn't. She only lived there for, I think, 3 or 4 years in total before she was
All right,
bankrupted.
okay.
and
Well,
had to
forget
leave, full of
about
syphilis.
Forget about the stupid Danes.
I think it's just a homing pigeon instinct that where you grow up and where people know you from when you're born. And
What
because
do
I
you
didn't,
do when you go back to Swaziland?
I see all the people that I used to know, most of whom ask me for money, and assuming that I'm very rich.
You give it?
Yes, of course. And
How much?
it's just that thing of when you go back and the smell and the sound of it and everything is just something that is so familiar and that is very attractive. But, you know, I obviously can't live my life there and do the career that I do because that doesn't exist. But why do you go back?
Well, I go back because I'm yellow, and you know I see a lot of yellow people there. I feel at home. But Swaziland is quite extraordinary because it's got a real mixture of things. It's got sort of obviously the Dutch influence, it's got English influence, it's got African influence, and Portuguese through Mozambique and so forth. Do you not feel that Swaziland is a sort of hot pot of nations and influences?
Yes.
So
It's
you don't
essentially
really have
all these things that you're talking about, living there felt very much, you can only really judge a place once you've left it. And I think that, you know, that famous quote, how can he England know who only knows England? And it seemed normal growing up in a place where there were, you know, vervet monkeys at the bottom of the garden and snakes and all those things that you took for granted that you don't find if you were brought up in Chelmsford or Chiswick. So I think that in looking back on it, it was described as a kind of equatorial Ealing of an English sensibility stuck in the 1950s.
Equatorial Ealing?
Yeah.
What's Ealing got to do with it?
Well, that it's a kind of suburban enclave, you know, outpost of what was left of the British sort of empire.
Have you met the king?
The king of Swaziland? Yes, I have.
Is he a good friend of yours?
I couldn't call him a good friend of mine, but when he saved me because the film that I made about my life there when I was growing up, I had to beg clemency from the king at literally the 11th hour because an appallingly corrupt, hopeless French producer, whose name I will never mention, but who I have eviscerated in a book of diaries that I published about her, she came up with this thing where she said, I had banged onto her for the 2 years before the film actually started getting made, and said, you have to get work permits to allow us to work in Swaziland. You couldn't turn up at the 120 foreign nationals at Charles de Gaulle Airport and say, we're going to be shooting in the Champs-Élysées in 2 days' time without work permits. And she said, she came up with this line, she said, oh, ask that big old fat Swazi. i.e. that being the Minister of Internal Affairs. And I had to go and beg clemency of this gentleman who she'd, you know, annihilated like this at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was red carpeted. And he said, the only recourse you have now is to appeal to the king. So I did. And he allowed us to start shooting without all the work permits being processed. So I've never been so grateful for a totalitarian figure in my life as that.
Did you have to prostrate yourself in front of him?
Everybody else did. And the Swazi minister, who had absolutely bollocked me and, you know, blew murder in my face, he was lying prostrate on the floor while I was sitting on a throne next to the Swazi king.
Whoa.
And yes, there was a throne. Probably an IKEA version.
Is he
of
a
throne.
real... Is he a real dictator?
I want to be able to go back to Swaziland on a yearly basis. So I'm not going to say anything more about the politics of the country.
I mean, I read him up, and he's extraordinary. His father
was an extraordinarily good man.
His father ruled the longest of any monarch in the world for 86 years. Mm-hmm. That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, and he was an extraordinarily good man.
The Queen of England will have to rule another 20 years before she can surpass him. But he was a good man.
Yes, he was, a very good man.
And your father, did he know him?
My father knew him, and my father also spoke Siswati fluently. And the king had this amazing philosophy, I thought, when independence came about. He said that you can't have harmony in a country unless, if you think of it as piano keys, that you can't have black notes without white notes playing in harmony. If you have one without the other, there will be no music. And I thought that was a very simple and
How about
just
red Indians and yellow Chinese?
they don't really live in Swaziland.
It's not on the keyboard. But anyway, I know that when people interview you, you're very proud of your home, where you feel most comfortable in, and where you have a lot of sentimental things. So an abiding image of you I've seen in interviews where you've got your father's pith helmet, his spear, his camera, and so forth. So you really hang on to all these things, which is very endearing, but presumably you are an incurable sentimentalist.
Yes, and also, well, I don't know, is that something to be incurable from? I don't know. I'm very rational
You seem to be
about
incurable
life.
from it, because everything you have around you has got a meaning to it. I mean, you've got Barbra Streisand concert tickets framed and so forth. Tell us about what happened when you were 14 from Swaziland, writing to Barbra Streisand.
Well, I had an enormous crush on her. Do people even know who she is? Your age group? I don't know.
Do you think she's pretty?
I thought she was the most extraordinarily attractive, exotic creature that I'd ever seen in my life. I'd seen her on WhatsApp Doc when I was
Even
14.
with her nose?
When I was 14 in WhatsApp Doc, she wore a tank top, and I had wet dreams about Barbra Streisand.
Oh my God!
And I thought
Well,
she was
thank
just.
God, Swaziland is a landlocked country.
I thought she was just the most extraordinary and talented person, and my poor wife has had to live with this obsession of mine for all these years. So I finally met her at a party.
Before you were 14, what did you write to her about?
Oh, I wrote a fan letter because I had subscribed to Photoplay magazine, which you could get once a month, sent out from England. And it had described that she was having love problems with Ryan O'Neill. And I said, please come to Swaziland. We have a lovely house and a swimming pool. Nobody will know who you are, and you can come and stay in my house for 2 weeks. So when I finally met her, and she's slightly boss-eyed, she said, I never got the letter.
This is in 1992, which is, I calculated, 21 years later.
Yeah, but this is a lifelong obsession that I was told by a psychoanalyst would pass by the time I was 20. And I'm now just turned 60. And my wife knows that, literally, when James Brolin said he was going to marry, I felt like I'd been stabbed in the back, because I thought, my chance is gone. So if she was still, you know, she's now 75, but I'd still jump her bones without any problem. I think she's fabulous.
But I mean, she did not remember your letter, unfortunately. Were you devastated?
No, I mean, I'm sure that it never even reached her.
Yes, well, there it is. But would you still cross the world to go and listen to her and hear her sing?
I have done, yeah. And every time that she's performed live, since she's been on a lot of endless tours that have said she will never perform again. But every year she says that now. So I have gone to see her and paid thousands of
She
pounds.
had plastic surgery.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
I don't care.
Yes, you don't care.
I don't care.
Who is another person with whom you're obsessed?
Obsessed?
Yes, as much as Barbra Streisand.
Oh, she's the only person.
But I think that you were rather fearful of and very nervous about Meryl Streep.
Yes, yeah, because I think she is, for me and for many
You met
actors.
her when you were Heseltine, opposite her number as Lady T.
Yeah.
And you summoned up the courage to ask her for dinner. Tell us about that.
Well, I think she is the greatest living actor that we have ever had. I'm sure there may be people in the room that will disagree with that violently, but for protean talent, I don't think there's anybody that even approaches her or her career, hence her 75,000 Oscar nominations and 3 wins. So I had met, talk about people remembering, I'd met her at Carrie Fisher's birthday party in 1990, and she walked into the rehearsal room at Pinewood Studios when we were doing The Iron Lady, and she walked straight over to me, and there were 110 people in there, and she said, "How are you?" as though she had known me all her life. So for that alone, she deserves another Oscar.
But did she know who you were?
She pretended that she did, and she's such a brilliant actor that, you know, she felt like she was the greatest friend, and she's asked me where to rent houses in London, so we're like that.
Well, I hate to disappoint you. I've slept with Meryl Streep.
Have you? That's fine, as long as it's not
But only
Streisand, I don't give a
metaphorically,
fuck.
because I had to go and pick her up in a private jet, and so I could technically say we slept together in the same
okay.
cabin.
How does Lucy feel about that?
Well, she was extremely jealous,
Okay.
but you brought her home and you cooked her dinner.
I did.
What did you wanted to make sure that it was not over the top and so forth. So what did you cook her?
Caesar salad, crab linguine, and then pudding.
What sort of pudding?
Oh, it was sorbet.
Sorbet. No, I don't think it is sorbet. I've looked it up.
I wouldn't follow that.
Apple crumble.
Oh, I lied.
Yes. Now be very careful. Here's the man who lies. I caught him out. But other than all the things you do, the most extraordinary thing is that you have this very sensitive disposition of smell. You're a perfumier. Tell us about your obsession with smell.
Okay. When I had compulsively smelt and touched everything ever since I can remember. And my
Do you
father
smell anything here? Do you smell a rat?
No. I smell you, though. And my father said to me, I can remember when I was 9, he said, it is not normal to smell everything. And I said, well, the animals around us do. And I spoke to my teacher, and she said, no, we are animals. So I went back, and because he was in education, he couldn't argue with this, that we are animals, so hence smelling. He said, yeah, but you smell everybody and everything. It's too much. Anyway, when I was 12, I had a mad crush on an American girl called Betsy Clapp with a double P. And Americans were an exotic species in Swaziland, and they just landed on the moon in the same year, and I thought this was just extraordinary. So, and Betsy taught me how to French kiss. And I couldn't, which involves tongues, if you don't know.
A tongue sani.
A tongue sani. And I couldn't afford to buy her scent from the local pharmacy, so I tried to make it out of gardenia and rose petals boiled up in sugar water in jam jars, which I buried for 2 weeks, and it turned into stink bombs. And so it had been my secret obsession to try and make perfume for all these years, and then I did it at the instigation of Anya Heinmarsh, the handbag designer, who I was a house guest with in Mustique about 4 years ago, and she took me aside and she said, are you going to do something about this? And I said, what do you mean, psychiatrically? And she said, no. She said, I've never seen anybody so obsessed with this. So she took her iPhone out and gave me a list of people, and she said, these are the people you should go and see when you go back to London, and try and start up a business. So that is how it happened, and I've done it.
Why did it call Piccadilly 69?
Well, that's the third one. The first one is called Jack, the second one Jack Covent Garden, and the third one is Jack Piccadilly 69, because I came to London in 1969 when I was 12 years old, whilst I was madly in love with Barbara Streisand on the one hand and Betsy Clapp in the reality on the other, both Americans. And
possibly the psychological number of 69
is a sexual position.
Yes,
it's also
it gives you the smell.
Exactly, and the smell of coming out of
please, this is a family affair.
Walking out of Piccadilly Circus in 1969 in May, the whole of the Eros fountain was covered in patchouli-smelling hippies, and the smell of that, plus the petrol in the street and drinking bergamot tea at Fortnum and Mason, which had leather banquettes.
Yes, you were obsessed with the smell of leather as well in Fortnum and
So
Mason.
leather, petrol, patchouli, and bergamot all went into Piccadilly 69, and it's a bestseller as a result.
I have to tell you, I will send you the article. It came out in New Scientist earlier this year, because they discovered that other than sight and hearing, which are both commanded by waves, they've now come out with quantum mechanics on smell, because up till now, scientists realized that the way in which we smell are because of molecules and our receptacles. But what they found extraordinary was that, for example, cyanide and what's the other smell which is exactly the same? Almond, yes.
Arsenic.
And arsenic. They all smell the same, and therefore it couldn't be just molecules. It's got to be waves. So now I'm going to send you this article, and you'll be able to study your your smell disposition even more. It's a
Scientifically.
new horizon about smell. But now, I first became a huge fan of yours when you did those crazy programs on hotels.
Oh, thank you.
I just think that you were just like a child unleashed into the most fancy hotel. I don't know whether they would have allowed you if they realized how juvenile you would be off camera. But I mean, did you have a fantastic time doing all those hotels?
I did, and the first experience, thank you very much, but the first experience I had was we started shooting in New York 4 years ago, and the first hotel that we went into, I jumped on the beds, and I licked the plates, and I smelt everything, and I thought, well, they'll
That's
never...
the Delano.
Yes, they'll never use any of this stuff. And then the second day, I didn't do any of that. And then the producers in London called and said, why isn't he doing those things? Because we've already previewed with a test audience just the first lot of rushes that came through, and that is what people have responded to. So I was then encouraged to jump on every bed in sight. And when I got to do it in Japan, because that was the second series, I was told, both in China and Japan, that I was not allowed to jump on any of the beds because it was very insulting. But I did anyway. So,
Yeah. Well, the Japanese are freaks. They love smell. I mean, they smell everything. I mean, they're the biggest smellers in the world. So I'm very glad that you did that. But tell us, I mean, throughout this series, I mean, which were the couple of hotels or places that you were astonished by?
Meeting Donald Trump in Trump Towers was an astonishing experience.
Yes.
Because I had nobody at that point had any idea that this lunatic was going to become one of the most powerful men on the planet. And
the most powerful man.
He delayed the meeting by about, he changed the time 10 times, and eventually the Welsh director, who's got a big hair out to here, and he's an amazingly good man, and he said, oh, Richard, I've already had 2 vodkas. It's 8:30 in the morning. I got to go. My bladder's going. I've got to go right now. And I said, please, Mike, just wait until the Donald has come into the room before I interview him. But it was like a French farce, because he went out of one door, and Donald came, beat, came in the other door. And I thought, oh, fuck, he's germophobic. And Mike is going to come back, having just washed his hands from touching his vegetables next door. So Donald Trump came in and he said, who's in charge? Who's in charge? And I said, well, I'm doing the interview. And he said, well, you're not the producer. And I said, no, he's in the bathroom. And he said, oh, I'm going to have to touch his fucking hands after he's touched his fucking dick. I thought, oh, God. And then Mike, on form, came back through the door doing this. And I went, do this. And he went, what? I said, do this, because he knows that I'm friends with Steve Martin, who is germophobic, having been a child magician at Disneyland. So when I see Steve, we always shake elbows. And I just went like that. So he came up to the Donald and went like that. And then he sat down, and Donald Trump had said, you have 10 minutes and 10 questions, all of which had to be vetted in advance. So my opening gambit was him. I said, well, you have a German mother, a German father, Scottish mother. This Calvinist work ethic that must be in you is how you've brought up your children and run your business. And he said, this is not one of the questions. And I said, no, I'm asking you this because I want to know how you operate, because my wife is from Aberdeen, and I'm aware of this Calvinist, work ethic that's in her. And he said, oh, Aberdeen, I have a golf course there. And I said, I know, my brother-in-law has played on it. And he said, do you play golf? And I said, no. And he said, why not? I said, because when I was 10 years old, I woke up on the back seat of a car and found my mother fucking my father's best friend on the front seat, and he was a golfer. And he said, you're saying this on TV? I said, yeah, I made a movie about it called Wawa. He said, okay, gloves are off. We couldn't stop him talking. Hour and a half later, he walked out and basically said I was the new David Letterman, so,
Well, you should write all that down in your diary. But in fact, you are sentimental because I think Gabriel Burns gave you a tin model of the Mercedes-Benz on which you witnessed your father humping somebody in adultery. and you've kept that Mercedes.
I have. Are you? You are saying that my sentimentality. I get the feeling that you see that in pejorative terms. Are you unsentimental?
No, I'm not sentimental. I'm romantic. I'm trying to distinguish whether I'm trying to find out whether you're because sentimentality requires physical objects. You need tablecloths. You need to see the Babs thing. You need to have the tin. But a romantic dispenses with all those things. And I was about to ask you, if tomorrow your house burned down, would you be absolutely devastated, or will you retain all those memories and you would be none the worse for it?
Probably none the worse for it, but my
Liar.
wife and I are inveterate collectors and shoppers, so we'd just start shopping again instantaneously and fill
What
it
did
up.
you buy last?
What did I buy last?
Yeah.
We came back from Venice last night from a wedding and came back with a suitcase full of more lava-laden glasses. And we don't need more glasses.
Louder.
Louder, yeah. So
Okay.
what was the last thing you bought, you nosy Parker? What was the last thing you
I'll tell you,
bought?
I bought this man lunch today. It was rather expensive. Yeah, very good lunch. Now look,
From a similar part of the world that I am from.
I've hogged you for 25 minutes, so let's have some questions. Who will ask a question? Microphone ready? Go on. Who wants to ask a question? All right, okay, go on.
Thanks, Sir David. Is that okay?
Go on.
If you, just talking about your roles, if you play a really bad person, do you retain that feeling for a while?
Do I retain it for a while,
Yes.
playing a bad person?
Yes.
Well, you play a very bad person in, what was the recent?
Logan.
Yes, Logan.
Yeah. No, because once I'm not a method actor, so as soon as you've finished doing the scene or you go home at night, then it disappears. So, although I did a film 30 years ago called How to Get Ahead in Advertising, playing a man that grew a talking boil, and the director was such a sadist and required such a level of mania, and doing that for 7 weeks, I can remember coming home and my wife saying, "What do you want for supper?" Like, "Ugh!" So there would be, she said she was very grateful when it,
Was your boil still here?
yes, when it stopped shooting, but otherwise, no. I think that's why it's called acting. You leave it behind. But thank you for your question.
You're awfully well spoken.
Thank you.
Did you have elocution lessons, or is that your normal accent that you've always had?
What, do you think that he should have sounded more common? In fact, the director of Brideshead, I can't remember his name, says
Charles
that
Sturridge.
says that you've got a most extraordinary accent, and your accent sounds as if you came out of the 50s.
Well, that's what he said, and that goes back to the thing that I said about the Caucasian people in Swaziland being stuck in a kind of 1950s equatorial Ealing sensibility. That's how people spoke. So,
I mean, your father was an English teacher, so he must have spoken very well.
yeah, I mean, he's been dead so long that I can't really remember. I remember what he looked like and what he smelt like, but how he spoke, I can't really remember.
How old were you when he died?
I was 24.
That was a long time. I mean, you must have smelled him quite a bit and heard him quite a bit. Have you got a short memory?
Yes, but
Right.
Do you
we're
remember how your
established that.
father speaks? Is he alive?
No, he's not alive.
And do you remember exactly how he speaks?
Yes, I mean, he hardly spoke to me. But
I wonder why.
There it is. Next question.
Thank you for your compliment.
Yeah, go on.
L.A. Story is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Thank
I've
you.
watched it 3 or 4 times. And you play an Englishman who's a little out of place in Los Angeles, I think. After decades working in the movie industry, do you fit in Los Angeles now? Is that your scene?
The longest I ever lived in Los Angeles was 2 years at the beginning of the 1990s, during the time when L.A. Story was made and The Player and Age of Innocence and Dracula. And I think that being there at that time, but there wasn't this huge exodus of English actors that seems to happen as soon as they graduate from drama school, going to the pilot season now and getting big TV series. There were very few, there was a very small community of British actors living there. And when I was beguiled and thinking that I would like to carry on living there, my wife said to me in England on the phone before, you know, internet had been invented, she said, your ideas of current affairs is who Sylvester Stallone is stooping at this point in time, whereas Serbia is on fire, and that is the current affair. So get your priorities straight. So I said, and I came back. So, but I have hugely enjoyed working and living there, but unlike any other city that I've ever worked in, because it is essentially feels like a one industry town, because even if you go to the dentist, I can remember I had a fitting or something while I was filming Dracula. This guy said, I like it. And he said, I've got a skip for Coppola. It's a sequel to the Godfather. And I said, he's already made 3 of them. He said, no, I have another one. And I thought, there's no other city in the world that I can imagine that a dentist would be giving you a spec script in New York or London or anywhere else other than Los Angeles. So if you're in work there, it's every door is open because you might be in the next big hit. But to be unemployed in Los Angeles for more than 5 minutes is like walking around saying I've got AIDS or leprosy. So I don't have the mental furniture to live there and not be employed. So it's better for me to be a visitor. But thank you for your question.
Were you being fitted fangs for Dracula or what?
No, because Gary Oldman was having those. No,
Yeah.
I was playing somebody to try and defang people.
Oh, right, there it is. Did you enjoy that film?
Yes, I did, hugely, because I'd been such an admirer of Francis Ford Coppola, seeing all his movies when I was a teenager, that to finally work as an actor for him was something that I'd never, ever dreamt was possible.
And what was the one famous line that you might have remembered he said to you?
What is that? Oh, he said, I can't, when we were rehearsing at his Napa estate for 3 weeks before we started shooting, he said, I can't cook for 2 people, I can only cook for 30 people or more. And I thought that essentially summed up his personality of how he operated, that he liked to have dogs and children and relatives and friends, everybody around in this sort of circus of chaos while he was shooting a film, in acute contrast to Martin Scorsese, who I then worked with on Age of Innocence 2 months later, in which everything had to be done in monastic silence. And when somebody even whispered on the set, he said, what the fuck is on? Like this. So that thing of him saying that he only could cook for 30 people, I think he's the same in the way that he makes movies. He couldn't really make a two-hander comfortably. He wants to make things that would be a room full of people like
Well, I'm
this.
not surprised, he's so fat. He probably ate for 28, but there it is.
He's such a good
I
cook.
slept on his bed once because he rents out his apartment in Sherry, Netherlands. And there's a huge trough. And I suddenly realized why, because he's so fat. And the mattress has got a huge dent. I tried to get a discount, but it was rebuffed. Anyway.
I can't top that story.
Yeah.
Hi, Richard. How's it
Hi.
going? Just
Hi.
here. Firstly, you're my absolute hero, and I love all your work.
Thank you.
I did once bump into you on London Bridge, and instead of saying that, I just said, I love you. So sorry about that.
Do you remember that?
I
don't know if
love you
remember.
too. I love being told by bearded, red-headed men that they love me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Question is, what one piece of advice would you give someone who was just starting out acting?
Never give up, because I literally know is invisibly tattooed across almost everybody's head when you start out as an actor, and even if you've been doing it for a while, because once you get inured and used to the idea that people are going to say no as you walk through the door, once you get used to that, you think, oh, well, fuck it. What have I got to lose? Until somebody finally gives you a break or a job. So that is what I would say, because I don't think anybody can give you advice.
What happens if you never get a yes?
Well, I gave myself till I was 30. I thought if I don't get even semi-regular employment till before I'm 30, I would go back to Swaziland and try and do something else.
Well, here we are.
Here
How
we
old
are.
are you?
60.
No, how old are you? What? Right.
How
Well,
long-
give
how
it up.
long
Go
have
to,
you
go
been-
to Swaziland. Right, next question.
You're very famous. Do you find you can actually have a normal life in London?
I
Or
can
do you always
hand on
get
heart
stopped?
tell you, I'm very grateful that you say that, but I'm astonished that anybody's turned up here. I thought, well, they must think it's somebody else coming.
We pay them.
You pay them. Because you have no sense of that. I mean, I've been with people that are really famous, and you know that they can't walk down the street. And if people are in soap operas, I'm friends with Richard Wilson, and when he was doing One Foot in the Grave, he couldn't walk anywhere without people stopping, and it started driving him nuts, and I could see why. But I've never had that kind of thing, although my wife complains that I walk too fast. She has very short legs. She's 5'3". And she said that what will happen is that if I'm walking ahead, somebody will do this. Do this. But otherwise, not generally. I'm sometimes, you know, if you're in the airport and if you're standing in a queue where people know that you're in you can't escape, people will come and say, "Can I have a selfie or speak to you?" But I mean, 9 times out of 10,
Have you been
people
mistaken?
have I been mistaken for other
for-
people?
yes.
Yes. I've just been doing a film with Melissa McCarthy in New York for the last 3 months, and Jeffrey Rush has a new series on National Geographic playing Einstein, and people constantly in New York kept saying, "You're fabulous as Einstein." So that
I
happened.
think people must be blind. I mean, first of all, he's put on a huge nose for the part, and he looks nothing like you. You're much more handsome.
Well, thank you, David, but
But he's
I'm
very
answering your
ugly.
question.
Yeah.
Have I been mistaken for anybody else? Oh, and I was asked if I was related to Christopher Walken a couple of times as well, because of all this. So.
Next.
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Now and I, one of my favourite films, probably watched it more times than anything else.
Thank you.
You said you're not a method actor, but you've basically set the benchmark for playing a drunk. How do you do that? How's your liver?
Well, it helped. My father was a chronic alcoholic because after he discovered that my mother was shagging the best friend on the front seat of the Mercedes-Benz in 1967, he then plunged for the remainder of his life into acute alcoholism. So being around seeing an alcoholic operate at first hand, I suppose I got used to seeing what that behavior was. And ironically, I'm allergic to alcohol, as I discovered when I was 17, went to a doctor, and because I couldn't keep anything down, I thought it was psychosomatic. And the director, again, being a sadist, said, "You have to know what it is to be drunk." So he forced me, essentially, to spend an evening before the final day of rehearsals getting drunk. So that's what I did, to his enormous amusement, because I was falling over and crying and tore my clothes and couldn't, and then vomited and passed out for 24 hours. So I have been drunk.
But did you use that experience to act your drunken parts?
No, not at all.
So it
The
was a
director
complete waste
believes
of
that
time.
because he's a stupid arsehole and my best friend. No, he believes that because he is an alcoholic, so he sadistically wanted me to be absolutely paralytically drunk. But it was really observing my father and most of his friends that informed how I played that part. But thank you for your question.
Sorry, if I could take you back to your sadistic director friend.
Yes, Bruce Robinson.
Yes.
Yes. Do you know him?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
My friend over here was asking a similar question I was just about to ask. My question was, have you ever told a director, "No, I'm not doing that"?
Have I ever told a director, "No, I'm not doing"? Oh, yes. And it was on a Miss Marple, and he had replaced a director who had been fired. It was to the BBC, so nobody got any money. And he was, I'm not sure which part of the Scandinavians that he's from, but he said, "Oh, you got to stand at the fireplace and you got to do this like Kenneth Williams, you got to do all this." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that because I look like a total cunt, excuse me." And Geraldine McEwen had already said, "I'm sure you're a very nice man, but don't ever speak to me again because I think you're a complete arsehole." Anyway, this man, Nicholas Winding Refn, has gone on to have a massive career. And so we were obviously all in the wrong. And he shouldn't have been directing Agatha Christie. So he's done Drive and all these other movies that have made a gazillion. So that is the one time I have said, "No, I'm not going to do that," to their face. For the most time, you know, if they tell you something that you think is absolute pants, you go, yeah, I think that's an absolutely wonderful idea. Yes, no, that's a brilliant piece of direction, and then you just ignore it, and then they believe that you've done it, if they're no good. But thank you
Hi,
for that
Richard.
question.
Hi. I was just
Hi.
wondering, two questions really. What was the most demanding role you've played?
The
And
most?
What's demanding role you played? And
Demanding.
Demanding.
Oh, demanding, sorry.
And the
Demanding.
most, secondly, the role that you enjoyed playing the most.
The most demanding was what I mentioned earlier, was playing this Bagley man in How to Get Ahead in Advertising, because it was so manic and the director was so determined that I was in a state of sort of almost nervous combustion on a daily basis, that is a thing that by the end of it I literally felt like I had need to go to bed for a week. That was the most. And what was your second question? Most enjoyable was being a writer-director. Once I'd got that French producer ban from speaking to me, then I had the best time ever, because then you're in charge of everything. Whereas as an actor, you are, you know, you're a hand for hire. You have to say other people's words and you get directed by what to do. But if you've written and you direct something yourself, you're completely in charge of something. So, and if you're a control freak and a detail freak, both of which I am, it's the perfect job. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Of all the projects you've worked on, so you know, the TV, films, perfume, all of it, if you could go back and do one again from scratch and relive it all from the beginning, which one would you go back and do?
Having sex and having a child. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Is
never did that before.
I'd never done that before.
Have you not? Have you had sex and a child?
I have had sex, and a child has been a result of that. Yeah.
So you want to
So
repeat?
that I would go for that. Hands over everything else. Yeah.
There it is. Good.
Maybe not the answer that you wanted. Okay.
With whom would you love to have a child? I mean, I know your wife is here, but just fantasize. Just fantasize. I mean, if you could have a child with any woman in the world today, who would that be?
I'd have a two-way with Barbara and my wife. A menage. And my wife knows this, and she's sitting in the front row, so she knows. I'm going to be pelted with stones when I leave here.
Yes. No, because this is being recorded. Yeah. Stop
It's being recorded.
difficult.
Speaking to you
Can I
as-
go to jail for this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Even though I've been here as long as you, in 1980 I came from Zimbabwe, and my sort of accent is as if I got out the bush yesterday. But would you ever consider taking on a role depicting any form of colonialism in Africa? Or would it go against the grain?
No, I think that the only role that I would find really difficult to take on is if somebody who is sadistic to children. I find that I don't know if you're a father, but if I watch the news or read anything about things being done to children, I'm incapable of keeping it together and either want to kick the TV in or have to leave the room. And my wife is much more stoical and strong about this, and she said, watch this, you know, and I can't. So I'm a sap for that, and probably too sentimental.
No, go on.
But I'd play a colonial shit any old time.
Who do you think was the greatest colonial shit of all time?
I have a long list.
Are you an admirer of Cecil Rhodes, for example?
I am going to avoid that. I'm going to avoid answering that because this is being recorded, because I think that...
You've said quite a lot of words, which...
yeah, I think that you...
I mean, on the whole...
Retrospectively, if you go to attack somebody's life...
It's interesting for me to hear from people who are in the locality, if that's the right word,
right,
how you view somebody like Cecil Rhodes. Of course, there's a lot of controversy about him now, retrospectively. But, I mean, when you grew up, you heard the name and so forth. Were you an admirer, or were you intrigued, or did you think that he was a bit of a shit?
Well, I was at school in the 1970s by the time I had sort of any political consciousness, and I was at a school called Waterford cum Llaba with Nelson Mandela's two daughters and many dissidents who had sent their children from South Africa to Swaziland because it was the Switzerland of Africa at that point, to this school. So Cecil Rhodes was not somebody that any of us admired.
And did you come to meet Mandela?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And what was your experience with him?
Well, it was helped by the fact that I had been at school with his daughters, and the idea
What did you
that
do with his daughters?
many school plays, and what was extraordinary is that the last time I saw them was at the premiere of the Mandela movie in Leicester Square around the corner from here, and as the credits rolled, a man came onto the stage to announce that he had just died,
No.
which was it was an extraordinarily, because I'd just seen them and I hadn't seen them since I was at school, and they were saying to me, do you remember, because I introduced the film, they said, do you remember us from Swaziland? And I thought, right, yeah, what a weird turnaround that they should think that I wouldn't remember them, and then saw this movie about their father. So it was sort of a great big emotional, sentimental crash bang that night. So yes, I think that you will know that my feelings about Cecil Rhodes are now clear.
Go on.
Hi, Richard. Just wondering.
I can't see you.
Here.
Hi.
Stand up. Why are you standing up?
I'm now standing up.
Well, almost
Not
the
Ever
same.
diplomatic.
Yeah. Just wondering, what scent has haunted you the most? So given how sensitive you are to smells, what scent has kind of lingered in your memory for the longest and kind of haunted your memory of scent?
What scent? Oh, my favorite scent is a gardenia flower. And it's the one thing that so far has eluded all science because it's proved impossible to extract. So every
Well, hold on 1
gardenia
minute.
that's on the market is false,
Hold on.
is industrial.
Gardenia, very famous fracas. There's a perfume called fracas. It's entirely gardenia.
Yeah, but it's not a true gardenia. If you smelled a real
Well,
gardenia
not-
and you smell that, it's
What?
not the same thing.
Tuberose. No, I thought it was gardenia. But anyway, all right, so gardenia cannot be captured.
Not so far.
Not so far. Well,
Proved
you
the most
can-
elusive, which makes it even more the holy grail of, it's the most romantic thing that you can't. And if you pick them, they die so quickly as well. So that, to me, is also
don't pick
part
them.
of its beauty.
Yeah.
Well,
Carry them in a pot.
oh, I do. I've pressed them, I carried them, I've felt them. They're like vulva soft. They are.
Hi.
By the way, I want to say this to you. I have a theory that for perfume, I don't know whether you subscribe to it, it's no good having just one. You've got to have a landscape. I mean, I always put 3 or 4 scent on me when I put scent on. I didn't put any today because I knew you're a sniffer.
You
But
still
if
smell.
you put 3 or 4 things, would you get a three-dimensional feel?
Yes. Yeah, you do.
Good.
Yes.
All right.
That's
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt your question.
I wanted to ask, I'm a big fan of Girls, the Lena Dunham series, and I was quite surprised when you popped up on it.
So was I.
Well, and so I wondered how it came about that you were on that and what it was like working on that.
Thank you for your question. I had just, I was in the final stage of shooting a film called Dom Hemingway in the south of France with Jude Law 5 years ago, and his wife, Jenny Connor, is a producer of Girls, and he came up to me one day at lunch and said, have you ever heard of Lena Dunham? I said, yes. And he said, she has written you a 1-episode role of a recovering cocaine addict, and would you consider doing it? And I said, yes, of course. How does she know of my existence? And I then flew to New York, and she said, Lena Dunham said, I know that people know you from Withnail, but I love Spice World, the movie. I was so belittled by so many people for being in Spice World, the movie, and always had to explain. My 8-year-old daughter at the time said, I don't care what you do, you have to work with the Spicers. So I did, And so it's paid off because Adele, who's born on the same day as I am, and is a lot richer than I am, she's another Spice World fan. So I'll get tickets for her show because she loved that movie. So that is how it happened. And so I did one episode, and then she wrote me into 4 others. So that's how Girls came about. And I'm older than all of their fathers. So the fact that I was in there and got the chance to jump Jemima Kirk was just fantastic. Who needs Viagra? Yes.
Hi there, Richard.
Hi.
Hi. Got 2 quick questions, if that's okay. First one is, what's the story behind the 2 watches?
Oh, sentimentality. When my father was dying, he died at 52 in 1981, he gave me his watch as a dying gift. And then I lost it and found it 2 years later in a drawer of socks. And my wife, in the meantime, gave me an identical watch. But that watch, both of them are being repaired at the moment. So I have 2 completely different, I obsessively collect watches. So I have many. So Swaziland time is on one, and where I am now is on the other. So again, sentimentality.
Is there summertime?
Yeah, they're only 1 hour ahead of us now, as opposed to 2.
I mean, can't you remember?
No, because I failed all my maths at school, and I discovered when I was 19 that I wrote numbers down like dyslexics back to front.
If you were so sentimental, why didn't you set the watch to the time of the death of your father?
Why didn't I?
Well, why don't you? Yes.
Because I hadn't thought of doing that.
Well, think about it.
Because I know the time that he died, and having his watch and having time ticking on is a reminder that, you know, all our time is limited. So if it was fixed, I might forget that.
Yeah. What sort of watch was it?
Ebel watch.
E-B-E-L.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one of those.
And both the thingies that, yeah, both pins have fallen out.
Oh dear. Well, there it is. Your wife couldn't have been very good buying you the new one. I mean, that was the new version, right?
No, these were older. I mean, this happened 30 years ago. Yep.
Well, it's been in repairs for 30 years.
No, it's been in repairs for the last 2 weeks.
Yes, I didn't think that those were particularly...
What? No stupid questions, David, came from the floor.
Mark that man. He's not coming back to China Exchange. Go on, next one.
Richard, good evening.
Good evening. What's your name?
Jock McCarroll.
Hi, Jock.
Incidentally, I'm the elder brother
of Vivian.
Correct.
How extraordinary.
And it would be nice to have a couple of words with you afterwards. But what I was going to ask...
Vivian McCarroll, your brother, is who Withnail is based on.
Correct.
In case people don't know. I didn't know that you were his brother or that you existed.
Indeed,
how extraordinary.
I am. What I was going to ask you was, listening to you, listening to the questions, you seem to have done everything, been everywhere, had a very successful career. Are you thinking of perhaps, now that you're old enough for a bus pass, to...
No, I'm not!
To start...
I'm apparently at 65.
Yeah.
I said, fine, I can get a bus pass, and apparently you have to wait till you're 65 now.
Are you sure? I think it's 60, isn't it?
No.
65.
It's 65.
It certainly was my time, anyway, but...
Well, they've changed it, the fuckers.
Yeah.
Sorry, do carry on.
Yeah. Are you thinking of winding down or taking it a little bit easier now, or...
Do you think that I should?
Are you just going to rock on? Personally, no.
Thank you.
Keep going as long as you can.
Yeah.
But
the thing is,
to hear what you have to say.
How old are you?
I'm 76.
How old do you feel?
28.
Well, I wish I was as old as you feel, because I feel about 19, and that's the problem. That I haven't, you know, I may be 60, but my curiosity and appetite for life and everything doesn't seem at all diminished.
You said
whatsoever.
Nobody over 50 feels their age.
Yes.
Yes.
I think the only thing that over 50 you can't wear shorts above your knees, because old knees look like cauliflower on both sexes. That's my only rule. But you look fantastic from this distance. I know whether I should go to Specsavers, but you look I'm
The
considering that
sunlight.
your brother died at the age of 49. Is that true?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and he also became an alcoholic.
And how have you avoided that, the curse of that?
Just luck, I think. I've developed into a piss artist. Right.
You mean you're an alcoholic, but you have survived?
Yeah, no, piss artists aren't like alcoholics. They just enjoy doing it, but they don't have to do it.
I was so desperate to meet Vivian McCarroll, your brother,
Mm.
and Bruce Robinson said, no, it's not a good idea. You shouldn't meet him. And I never, ever did. It's my enormous regret. And so I don't know, is my portrayal of him anything like what he was, or is this fantasy?
Spot on.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I'm so thrilled. Isn't it ironic that my whole career has come from playing an out-of-work, unemployable actor, and your brother has become so famous for being the basis of who that man is? So that's very sweet to me and sentimental.
Hope to shake your hand afterwards.
Thank you. Gosh, how amazing.
Hi, Richard. I'm over here.
Where? Hi.
Hello. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you brought it up for me, so I'm quite excited now. I told my family that I was coming to this event this evening, and my uncle turned round. I was very excited. My sister and I are typical 90s kids.
Yeah.
Huge Spice World fans.
Yes.
We absolutely adore you. And I told my family that we were coming here, and my uncle said, "Oh, don't remind them of Spice World. They won't want to be reminded of that." But as you brought it up, it's literally one of our favourite films, mine and my sister. So the 10-year-old me would like to ask you, who was your favourite Spice Girl to work with, please?
Well, I hope that you'll appreciate that the 60-year-old me, in order to avoid a platform boot coming up my backside, I couldn't possibly tell you who was my favorite, because each of them was so different. And the sense of anarchy of working with them when they were all, I think, 21 and 22 years old, and they didn't keep to the script. They had, on the first day, they had 5 huge Winnebago caravans for them, and they said, "What are we going to do in those?" I'd never been given such a big one in my life before or since, and was thrilled because sort of actor status is according to the size of your caravan. And they saved the production a lot of money by saying, no, they're all going to be in one, and they did. So I spent almost all of my time in theirs with them. So it was a fantastic experience. And I just turned 40, and having my 40-year-old backside pinched on a daily basis by those 5 was just brilliant. I loved it. And they were great with my daughter too. So I had
Did you kiss any of them?
All of them. On a daily basis. Tongue sarnies, everything. No more stupid questions from the desk.
I want the name of that man.
It's so lovely hearing all people responding to your work over the years, from With Nail to Spice World, hearing about Doctor Who and Logan and things. Do you get a sense of people, of what they actually like before you actually talk to you? Do you know what people are a fan of before they start to express it? Sixth sense almost. Or is it always a surprise?
Sometimes. I put it this way. I've never met somebody who liked the film of Withnail and I who I didn't think I could go and have a drink with them. There have been Hudson Hawk fans that I've wanted to take to social services because it is beyond me how they could have liked that film, but clearly you're one of them. Thank you very much.
You shit.
I just felt so guilty that movie cost so much money and lost so much money. And almost closed down a studio, but anyway, I live to tell the tale. But thank you for your question.
Hi Richard, thank you for your insight so far. I'm a big fan of Withnail and I, as I'm sure a lot of people are here today. And the actor that played Uncle Monty, Richard Griffiths, I was just wondering if you have any recollections of working with him any funny moments on the film?
Oh, he was literally, physically, and in every way larger than life. His spirit was enormous. He could quote any poetry from any period, and he was somebody that could never, ever finish a story because the story was sort of ongoing, and he used to eat 3 breakfasts and 3 lunches, and on the first day of filming, we'd been shooting, I think, for a week in Cumbria, in Penrith, in this godforsaken cottage, and up a mountainside. And Richard arrived, having just done a film in Italy, and he hadn't learnt all his lines. And the first scene was in a cottage dining room where my character was not supposed to have eaten for 3 days, and I had to eat leg of lamb and roast potatoes and drink Ribena, standing in for red wine, at great speed and with enormous gusto. And Richard kept drying and laughing and anecdoting in between. So as a result, I ate, I think, 3.5 legs of lamb, 4 kilos of potato. I had to have a vomit bucket because I couldn't fit it down anymore. So I've never eaten lamb since, and they were bleating on the side of the mountain. But the pleasure of Richard's company, and he was so brilliant in that film, transforming a character that could have been a very lecherous, unpleasant, unsympathetic man into this, you know, Billy Bunter of enormous charisma and vulnerability, was something that was worth eating all those legs of lamb for. So that was Richard, and I didn't meet anybody that didn't love and adore him. He was very conscious about money because he grew up in a very poor family, and he was very resentful about the fact that none of us earned any residuals from the endless showings and screenings of Withnail that have happened, and the DVD sales, and prior to that, video sales. So he wouldn't take part in the documentaries or the reunion screenings or any of those things. And I understood that he felt that, but as it gave me my career and all the good fortune that I've had since, it's not in my, it wouldn't be good for me to be holding on to that kind of toxicity, I suppose. So, but he did. So that was the flip side of how he was about the film. But he loved doing it, and he loved all of us. So, you know, that's how I remember him.
Okay, let's have one last question
That'd
from
be
the
good.
lady. Chinese.
Hi. Why do
Are you
think-
Chinese?
Yes, I am. I
Okay.
am Chinese. Why and how did it become such an iconic film? So, what was special about With Neil and I? Why did it catch on this iconic? It's become a legend of a film.
I have
With
no
Neil and I.
idea. It was, I think it played for a very short time at the Odeon, which has now been demolished, on the Haymarket. And I think it played for about 4 weeks, and it got middling reviews. And only when it started being watched on video and then subsequently DVD and shown around colleges and universities and schools did it have this sort of ongoing life. And it's sort of accrued. And what is curious to me is that some of the critics who annihilated it when it first came out revisited it 20 years later and said, oh, it's like a fine wine, it's grown. And you think, no, it hasn't. It's the same film that it always was, you fuckhead. So, sorry, not you. Not you, ma'am. And I think that because there's something quintessentially English about it, and it deals with male friendship, and that cusp at the end of when you're an adolescent, even though the character Withnail is already 30, that when you have to take on adult responsibility, and the friendships that you have at that time in your life are so intense and formative that seems to have been a common denominator for people. And I'm only saying this in retrospect because people have told me this. At the time, we hadn't a clue because they told us it would never be released. It had no women, no car chases. Crocodile Dundee was the big hit of that year, and Fergie married Porky. I mean, what his name was? Prince Andrew, sorry. The Prince Andrew.
That wasn't very difficult to beat, I can tell you that.
And an unpronounceable title, and people that nobody had ever heard of. So it seemed as unlikely a film to succeed as anything. So, but thank you for your last question, and thank you for having me.
Well, all I would say at the end of this is that if I were on a desert island, I think you would be quite a nice fellow to have on my own, because you've done so many things and you're a bit juvenile, and I love the swearing, and you're a cult figure, you go on doing many things, and you've done so many things, and you're sentimental, and you're romantic, so you will always know that we'll be rescued off the desert island.
And I can cook.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in thanking Richard E. Grant.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.